Chapter 8 Shadows of Justice. The low torchlight danced against damp stone walls as Balin gripped his glaive, the weapon's familiar weight offering little comfort as he inched around the cavern's entrance. The ale he'd downed hours ago at the Stonehill Inn had long since worn off, leaving him with nothing but cold sobriety, and even colder sweat running down his spine. From somewhere deep in the shadows, a bugbear's dying hiss echoed, followed by a faint rustling he couldn't quite place. The dwarf paused, breathing heavily, his armor suddenly feeling twice as heavy. Moments earlier he'd seen movement among the boulders, a second threat lurking in the darkness. He'd made a tactical withdrawal from the others fighting the bugbears. Any seasoned warrior would have done the same, he assured himself. Still, the weight of uncertainty made his heart hammer like a blacksmith's anvil.
"Come out, ye rat,"
he muttered under his breath, scanning the cavern's rocky floor with eyes that had served him well in countless underground battles. A soft shifting of pebbles made him pivot sharply, raising his glaive in practiced defensive stance. Silence followed, no rush of charging feet, no snarling beast. Yet the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. The shadows offered no answers, only the oppressive press of darkness. He exhaled slowly through his beard, stepping carefully back up the stairwell to ensure nothing had circled behind him. The last thing he needed was something creeping up, while bugbears, if any survived, lurked around the corner. Balin strained his ears, trying to filter out the pounding of his own heart. The hush felt heavier than it should, unnatural even for these depths. On impulse, he turned toward the direction of his companions, only to hear distant shouting. His dwarf heart wrenched with indecision. Return to the party or continue his reconnaissance?
"Bah, can't fight on two fronts,"
he growled, the words echoing his thoughts with convenient logic.
"That'd be suicide. Plain and simple."
Gripping his weapon tighter, he pressed on into the cavern, keeping an uneasy watch. Sometimes the bravest thing a warrior could do was live to fight another day. Far from Balin's scouting, the rest of the group had dragged themselves to the relative safety of the Red Brand's common room. Blood-stained armor and cloth. Whispers of exhaustion passed between them. Burnt hair, bruised limbs, and battered pride. Everyone felt the sting of the last skirmish. Doreen slumped against a battered table, glaring at the door.
"I can't believe that dwarf ran off like a rat,"
she spat.
"We were in the thick of it and he disappears."
Near a flickering brazier, Zyra examined a ragged tear in her sleeve, dark red blotches seeping through. She winced as she touched the tender skin, but her gaze flicked to Doreen.
"Don't jump to conclusions. Maybe he was hurt, or maybe he saw something else coming."
Morthal stood, arms crossed, though fatigue sagged his shoulders.
"Balin is no coward. If he left, there was a reason."
His eyes lingered on Alara, pale, trembling with unspoken pain, though he tried to mask it behind a stoic expression. Doreen rolled her eyes.
"All I'm saying,"
she drawled,
"is that it's foolish to keep exploring without rest. And for what?
she gestured dismissively.
We're not even being paid to rescue Myrna and her brats."
A spark of anger flared in Ilara's eyes. Though he spoke softly, there was a fierce edge to his words.
"She's an innocent woman. Her children are innocent. I've no stomach for leaving them in this cesspit. Gold or no gold."
Zyra lifted her chin, speaking in a crisp, determined tone.
"Doreen, we decided we'd help these people. You can't demand coin for every act of decency."
"Maybe you can afford to be noble."
Doreen shrugged.
"I prefer not to bleed out for free."
Morthal raised a hand, halting the brewing argument.
"Enough. We finished what we started. The longer we wait, the greater the risk to Myrna's family. We push forward, once we've caught our breath."
Ilara gave a tired nod.
"We can question that goblin. It might know where the hostages are.
He leaned against the wall, then carefully ran a hand through his sweat-soaked hair. A flicker in his gaze hinted at something deeper, some private torment. Reluctantly, Doreen kicked at a loose stone.
Fine.
She muttered.
But if Balin's downing ale at the inn while we do his dirty work?
Her voice trailed off into a bitter scowl. The argument about their next move settled into grudging agreement. Question the goblin, then rest. Morthal's sharp eyes hadn't missed the way Zira winced with each movement, the dark stains spreading across her back. He caught her attention with a subtle gesture.
Your wound.
He said in a low voice, pitched for her ears alone.
It's worse than you're letting on. You must let me tend to it.
She refused at first, turning away.
It's nothing.
Her voice trembled almost imperceptibly.
I'll manage.
Morthal's jaw set in concern.
You're bleeding through your dress. Without treatment, you won't survive another fight. And we both know there will be another fight.
Zira's eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal. Doreen was absorbed in looting a fallen red brand, muttering about compensating herself for her troubles. Ilara sat apart, methodically cleaning his blades with movements that seemed more ritual than necessity. Neither paid them any mind, but still, Zira's heart thundered in her chest. Finally, she gave a barely perceptible nod and retreated to the room's darkest corner. With trembling fingers, she lifted the shredded back of her blouse. Her breath caught, her entire body tense. Eyes squeezed shut, she waited for the inevitable. The sharp intake of breath, the recoil of disgust, the damning silence. It all had followed her since childhood. The dragon's bride, a monster, abomination. Morthal's sharp intake of breath confirmed her worst fears, as he observed the crimson scales glinting beneath her torn flesh. He blinked, then looked at Zira but did not say anything. But Zira saw it in his eyes. He was clearly shocked. Then Morthal quickly turned his gaze back to the wounds.
These scales,
he murmured.
They probably saved you.
His fingers hovered near the wound.
Let's get this cleaned and bandaged now.
And he started tending the wounds in silence. To Zira, the silence felt suffocating. No questions, no condemnation, but no acceptance either. Her heart sank. She thought, he's hiding his disgust. She bit her lip and turned away, ashamed to meet his eye. Working with practiced efficiency, Morthal applied healing salve and whispered prayers to Helm. Divine light pulsed softly, knitting flesh and scale alike. He could feel her trembling beneath his touch.
We all carry marks of our past,
he offered quietly.
Some are just more visible than others.
Zira yanked her clothing back into place, unable to meet his gaze. Her carefully constructed facade had cracked, and she couldn't bear to see pity, or worse, fear in his eyes. Without a word, she retreated, leaving Morthal to pack away his supplies. Watching her go, Morthal sighed heavily. He'd faced down armies, counseled soldiers through battle trauma. But this was different. He understood now why Helm had guided him to this group. These weren't just warriors needing leadership. They were broken souls needing guidance. As he methodically folded clean bandages, he sent up his silent prayer.
Grant me wisdom, Helm, to heal more than just flesh.
Their captive, a scrawny goblin with tattered ears, lay unconscious on the cold stone floor. Morthal unceremoniously splashed water across its grimy face, causing the creature to sputter awake with a startled yelp. Panic flashed in its beady eyes as it registered the armed figures looming above. The goblin let out a high-pitched screech, scrambling backward until it hit the wall, leaving dirty claw marks on the stone floor. Zira stepped forward, adopting the same silky tone she used to charm nobles at court.
We mean you no harm,
she said in common, crouching to appear less threatening.
Do you understand me?
The goblin responded with a stream of guttural sounds, its yellowed teeth chattering with fear. Elara attempted a different approach, his movements deliberate and slow. He crossed his wrists, mimicking chains, then gestured around the cellar.
Prisoners.
He said clearly, watching the goblin's face.
Where?
The creature only shook its head violently, either from fear or genuine incomprehension. While the others focused on the interrogation, Doreen methodically searched the fallen enemies. Her nimble fingers found what they sought, a hefty coin purse that brought a predatory smile to her face. Glancing quickly around, she saw her companions fully absorbed in questioning the goblin. Satisfied no one was watching, she slipped the purse into her vest with practiced ease. From his position in the doorway, however, Morthal observed the theft with grave eyes, though he kept his counsel.
This is pointless.
Zyra huffed, rising gracefully despite her injuries.
The creature clearly knows nothing, or won't tell us if it does. We're wasting precious time.
Agreed.
Morthal said, his voice betraying nothing of what he'd witnessed.
Can we secure it here? No sense leaving an enemy at our backs, however small.
Well, at least I found something useful.
Doreen interjected, deliberately rattling the iron key she'd discovered.
Let's lock this wretch up and move on.
Her voice carried a hint of impatience, probably through her eagerness to be done with their charitable mission. A bone-chilling shout pierced the stale air of the common room, echoing from the depths of the larger cavern.
Enemies are here too!
Balin's voice carried notes of genuine alarm that made everyone's blood run cold. Morthal and Elara shared a split-second glance before springing into action, weapons sliding free with practiced ease. Zira followed close behind, her hands already weaving subtle patterns of preparation. At the threshold, Doreen paused only long enough to secure the door, trapping their goblin prisoner and the corpses inside before racing after the others into the gloom. The cavern stretched before them like a monster's maw, split by a dark chasm that seemed to breathe cold air. Near a precarious rope bridge, Balin stood his ground against something that made even seasoned warriors pause, a hunched, humanoid horror with a single hateful eye. Putrid saliva dripped from its maw, sizzling where it struck stone. Elara's breath caught in his throat. Recognition hit him like a physical blow, memories of that alien presence that had once invaded his thoughts flooding back.
That voice.
He whispered, his hands tightening on his sword hilts.
It's the same one.
Focus!
Morthal's command cut through Elara's momentary paralysis as the cleric charged forward, shield raised against whatever dark powers the creature might possess. The monster's baleful eye fixed on Balin, and the dwarf's battle cry transformed into a grunt of agony. Something vile and corrupting tried to take root in his flesh, but dwarven constitution proved stronger than the creature's magic. With a defiant roar, Balin whirled his glaive in a devastating arc that barely missed the monster's eye, the weapon's blade singing through the air. The creature retaliated with terrifying speed, its claws finding gaps in Elara's armor. The elf's eyes went wide with pain as razored talons tore through flesh. His swords clattered against stone as he collapsed, blood pooling beneath him mere inches from the chasm's edge.
Hold fast!
Morthal lunged forward, his shield becoming a barrier between his fallen companion and certain death. The impact of the creature's second strike sent vibrations through his arm, but he held firm.
Keep pressure on it!
He commanded through gritted teeth. Zyra's voice rose in arcane song, her hands painting sigils of power in the air.
Face me, abomination!
Fire erupted from her fingertips, illuminating the cavern in crimson light. The monster reeled, its flesh smoking where her magic struck. Behind his shield, Morthal spared quick glances at Ilara, who lay motionless, save for shallow breathing. Blood spread across the stone floor, but there was no time to tend to him, not while the creature still posed a threat. Balin moved with deadly purpose, his blade forcing the monster back step by step. Morthal advanced with him, shield locked high, while Zira's magic corralled their prey toward the abyss. Balin seized his moment with devastating precision. His battle cry echoed off the cavern walls as he brought his glaive down in an unstoppable arc. The weapon bit deep, cleaving the monster from crown to sternum. Its death rattle sent shivers through them all. Breathing heavily, the dwarf planted his glaive's butt on the ground.
Thought I'd found me own private war,
he grunted, nodding to his companions. Morthal immediately rushed back to Ilara's side, channeling Helm's healing light into the grievous wounds. Color slowly returned to the elf's ashen face as divine energy knit flesh back together. Ilara's eyes fluttered open, and he rose unsteadily with Morthal's help, acknowledging the aid with a terse nod. At the chasm's edge, Zira peered into the darkness below, summoning a small light to pierce the gloom. Though she saw nothing in the depths, an unnatural cold crept up her spine, whispering of darker things still lurking in the shadows. She stepped back quickly, unable to shake the feeling that something ancient and malevolent dwelt in those lightless depths. The party dragged themselves back to the Red Brand's common room, muscles aching and spirits low. The heavy wooden bar dropped across the door with a final thud. Doreen claimed a bench, her scowl deepening as she watched Balin make straight for the storage area. The dwarf's face lit up at the discovery of an ale barrel, and soon the sound of him working the tap filled the tense silence. Ilara watched Balin's desperate gulping with a mixture of pity and frustration, but kept his peace. His own wounds still throbbed beneath Morthal's hasty healing, a reminder of how close they'd come to disaster. Near a guttering torch, Morthal slumped against the wall, the weight of responsibility visible in every line of his face.
We're down to the last drops of our vigor,
he said, massaging his temples.
but those children,
His voice trailed off, heavy with unspoken urgency.
Face facts.
Doreen cut in, her words sharp with exhaustion.
We've been fighting our way through this nest of rats all night. For all we know, Myrna and her brats are already dead. And let's not forget about Glasstaff. That snake's still hiding somewhere in these tunnels.
In the darkest corner of the room, Zira pressed herself deeper into the shadows. The memory of Morthal discovering her secret burned hotter than any wound. She turned away, fighting the sting in her eyes, grateful for the poor lighting that hid her face. Ilara observed Morthal's mounting distress with quiet understanding. He moved to the cleric's side, resting a tentative hand on his armored shoulder.
We do what we can,
he murmured, his soft words carrying the weight of personal experience. His eyes, haunted by their own demons, met Morthal's with silent empathy. Here was someone who knew intimately the crushing responsibility of trying to hold others together while barely managing to stay whole yourself. The room fell quiet except for Balin's drinking and the occasional pop from the dying torch. After an hour's uneasy rest, the group mustered the will to move. Ilara, steadier now, volunteered to scout ahead.
That monster had to come from somewhere,
he muttered.
And if this manor has more than a mouldy cellar, we should find it.
They carefully made their way across the same bridge where Balin had fought the one-eyed beast. Beyond, they discovered a small storeroom, barrels, crates, little else. Suspicious, Morthal checked the walls.
Odd place for a dead end,
he mused, running his hands along the stone.
No sign of an entrance above.
A gentle tap revealed a panel that gave under pressure.
Here.
He glanced at Ilara and nodded. Together they eased it open. Beyond the hidden door lay a cramped corridor, leading to another concealed exit. Ilara slipped through first. His keen elven eyes caught movement. The room beyond glowed with steady lantern light, illuminating a scene that made his heart race. A slender figure in expensive robes bent over a desk, consulting papers with scholarly intensity. Beside him leaned an ornate staff, its crystal head catching and fracturing the light. Glasstaff, the mysterious wizard who had brought so much suffering to Phandalin, sat before them, completely unaware of their presence. Ilara burst into motion before conscious thought could slow him, twin blades singing through the air.
Your reign of terror ends here, wizard.
Glasstaff whirled with surprising agility, his scholarly demeanor vanishing like smoke. In an instant he simply wasn't there, reappearing behind a stack of crates with practiced ease. His hands traced geometric patterns in the air, and the room filled with the sharp scent of ozone. Electricity erupted from his fingertips, catching Ilara full in the chest. The elf slammed against the stone wall, his grip on his swords white-knuckled but unwavering even as his head lolled forward and his knees buckled. Crackling electricity danced across his armor, making his body convulse in an agonized puppet's dance as wisps of smoke rose from his scorched leather. Glasstaff turned toward his fallen opponent, arcane energy still crackling around his fingers. But Doreen emerged from the shadows behind him, moving like liquid darkness. Her rapier found its mark between his shoulder blades with surgical precision. The wizard's pained gasp echoed off the walls as crimson bloomed across his expensive robes. He spun to face this new threat, hands already weaving another spell. But in focusing on Doreen, he'd made a fatal mistake. Ilara, who had only feigned the extent of his incapacitation, seized his moment. With a surge of desperate energy, he pushed through the pain and struck. His crossed swords bit deep into Glasstaff's exposed flank, catching the wizard entirely by surprise. The spell died uncast on his lips as he crumpled to the floor, his staff rolling away across the stones. Zyra and Morthal charged through the doorway, magic and divine power at the ready, only to find the battle already decided. Morthal immediately knelt beside the fallen wizard, his healer's instincts taking over as he checked for signs of life.
Still breathing,
he announced grimly.
We can...
But Doreen's eyes flashed with cold calculation, and she lunged forward before Morthal could finish his sentence.
No, you don't.
She snarled, her blade already in motion.
He's too dangerous to live.
The rapier plunged deep into Glasstaff's chest with practiced precision. The wizard's body jerked once, his lifeblood spreading across the ancient stones.
Doreen!
Morthal's voice cracked with fury and dismay as he caught the wizard's shoulders, feeling the last warmth of life fade beneath his hands.
He is defenseless, unconscious. The law must decide his fate.
Zyra stood frozen, Glasstaff's ornate staff trembling in her white-knuckled grip.
By the gods!
She whispered, horror etched on her features.
What are you doing?
Panic flashed across Doreen's face before transforming into wide-eyed terror.
He was in my head.
She shrieked, her voice rising to echo off the chamber walls.
His voice, his magic trying to possess me. I could feel him worming into my thoughts.
The word possession struck Ilara like a physical blow. Something dark and primal stirred in his memory, and before anyone could move, his swords flashed in a deadly arc. Glasstaff's head rolled across the blood-stained floor, a final insurance against supernatural threats that perhaps only Ilara truly understood. Blood spatter painted Morthal's shocked face as he stared at the desecrated corpse.
Possession,
he breathed, religious dread creeping into his voice.
Could it be true? Could some evil spirit have,
Zyra turned away from the grotesque scene, but her mind raced. She remembered fragments of conversation, hints Doreen had dropped about a wizard named Maldrath who still haunted her nightmares. With careful gentleness, she asked,
Doreen, was it Muldrath you felt?
Doreen seized the lifeline with desperate gratitude, her body beginning to tremble.
Yes.
She stammered, tears welling in her eyes.
His presence, just like before. I couldn't let him take me again. I couldn't.
She choked on the words, a performance so convincing it nearly fooled even her. Zira felt her stomach twist in doubt. She wanted to condemn Doreen's act, call it murder. But the rogue's wide, frightened eyes drew a flicker of pity. At very least, she herself believed that Maldrath was in her head, and other than that, there simply was no motivation for her to kill Glasstaff. Morthal released Glasstaff's corpse with shaking hands, murmuring a prayer that held more questions than blessings.
The truth dies with him,
he said heavily, performing last rites over the separated head with mechanical detachment. Doreen cleaned her blade with methodical care, a brief flash of satisfaction crossing her features before being masked by continued trembling.
We need to secure the area,
she managed.
In case there's more.
Ilara remained statue still, both swords still gripped tight, his haunted gaze fixed on the decapitated corpse as if expecting it to rise again. Whatever memories gripped him remained locked behind clenched teeth.
The children,
Morthal finally said, his voice rough.
We came for Myrna's family. Perhaps his notes will lead us to them.
He gestured to Glasstaff's desk, desperate for any purpose beyond this blood-soaked moment. No one spoke against it, though the atmosphere had grown thick with unspoken accusations and fears. Each step deeper into the manor's mysteries seemed to challenge their understanding of right and wrong, of necessary violence and cold-blooded murder. In the oppressive quiet that followed, each member of the party wrestled with their own demons, some more real than others, and in the darkness beyond their lamplight, the manor's ancient shadows seemed to pulse with secrets yet unrevealed, promising that their moral compromises were far from over.
Deep in chambers dark with age where candles flicker low, a wizard's staff upon the stage commands the final show. And those who walk these ancient halls must choose what price to pay when darkness echoes through the walls and mercy slips away. So let them judge our deeds tonight from towers safe and tall. They've never seen how shadows fight when desperate voices call. For sometimes in the darkest hour, when evil shows its face, we trade our souls for fatal power and leave without a trace.
Some say justice guides our hand when blood flows on the stone. But in this cold and cursed land, we reap what fear has sown. The ghosts that haunt our troubled minds will never let us rest, till every thread of mercy binds with vengeance in our chest. So let them judge our deeds tonight from towers safe and tall. They've never seen how shadows fight when desperate voices call. For sometimes in the darkest hour, when evil shows its face, we trade our souls for fatal power and leave without a trace. Dawn appears to light away. We'll count the cost in bitter tears for choices made today. But stone remembers every sin, and time reveals no truth. When shadows break our hearts within and steal away our youth. So let them judge our deeds tonight, from towers safe and tall. They've never seen how shadows fight when desperate voices call. For sometimes in the darkest hour, when evil shows its face, we trade our souls for fatal power and leave